WKNR, Keener 13. Another hour of music power.
Who do we have here? What's your name?
Tom on the line.
Yeah, hello, Tom. What's going down?
I was going to rant with you about McCartney being dead. What is this all about?
Yeah, well, what school do you go to?
I go to Eastern Michigan.
Eastern Michigan, and you heard that McCartney was dead.
Yeah, that's right.
I was driving in my car, and it was Sunday afternoon, October 12th. And I tuned into Russ Gibbs' radio show on whatever the station was, ABX or WKNR or something. And somebody had called in. I didn't hear the initial call, I don't think, but the sense was that something was wrong with Paul.
Well, you know, it wasn't this cold when we buried Paul McCartney, I'll tell you that. Whew. Welcome to a Michigan winter. Keener, the old studio. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Used to be a big sign up here. It says Keener Broadcasting, WKNR. And then here we are. Boy, this brings back memories. This is it. This is where the whole thing started. WKMR, Keener Broadcasting, and we buried Paul McCartney from here. And the day we did the show, there were hundreds and hundreds of people piled up outside. Cars were jammed up. The police were moving them along. It was absolutely crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
What happened is that the phone rang one day, and it would ring a lot, and I have a lot of time, so I picked up the phone, and there was some kid, and he said, "Have you heard that Paul McCartney is dead?"
All I was trying to find out was what was going on, so I make this phone call and I dial up. They put me right through, and I got talking on the air to thousands of people who were all listening.
And I said, "Oh, look, I hear that every rock and roll guy is dead. They beat their wife or they're taking cocaine. You know, I've heard all the stories." He said, no. He said, "Have you ever?" I said, "Yes, I've heard that everybody's dead in rock and roll."
I was figuring that he was, I'm not trying to, I really wanted an answer.
One guy that's playing this Revolution number 9 backwards.
Yeah.
And did you hear about that?
No.
And I said, "What are you talking about, playing a record backwards?" He said, "No, try it."
Russ had never heard of this, and I thought he was going to tell me what it meant. He'd never heard of this, and he kept me on the air and kept me on the air.
I remember Russ talking about it was, what is going on with this?
And I put it on, and it said very clearly, number 9, number 9, number 9. And when I played it backwards and spun it backwards, it said, "Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man." Whew. I freaked.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
Underman, honey Underman, honey Underman, honey Underman, honey Underman, honey Underman, honey Underman.
At that instant, the phone lit up. I mean, it just, boom.
People who were listening all called the local other media. They called the radio stations and the television stations.
Within 7 minutes, the head of our news department was in saying, "What's going on? Our phones are all jammed. I can't get in or out." Everything was going crazy.
And it just went nuts. People just went nuts.
People started to bang on the door. And kids were coming to a window. We had a big window, and I could see through the 2 glasses that we had that there were kids coming around with instants.
all of the international telephone lines were choked with calls. You could not get a telephone call to Europe because people were calling to talk to Paul McCartney. People at television stations and radio stations were, is he dead? Did he die?
And then they started to call with other things. Have you played Strawberry Fields Forever? I buried Paul. Well, now I'm freaking out. And so all of a sudden this thing gets gigantic. We don't know what to do because bingo. It's like the world has exploded.
Tell me if you can.
Tina was having sort of going hysterical yesterday.
You did not see McCartney?
No, I did not see him. Do you want to get in contact with Paul McCartney?
I sure do. But you hadn't seen him in 6 months.
But he wasn't Paul, but I don't know. Paul hasn't done interviews for months.
The interest was just incredible because of who they were.
The idea of the Beatles breaking up in any way possible was horrendous. The thought of it was horrendous.
Now, who was Paul McCartney? He's a Beatle, but he also was the teenage idol who was moving into the university level, being an idol. He was obviously the best looking, you know. He was the one that had the voice.
To me, he was the Beatles because of his lead vocals and his writing. He and John, of course, but Paul was less controversial.
Russ Gibb was 30 minutes into his Sunday show when the first clue hit his telephone.
We realized that whatever we had said was going out all over the world because I started to get calls from New York, from California, instantly. It went all over the United States.
This went around the whole world.
And it was that particular day. I remember it wasn't the day before and it wasn't the day afterwards. It was that particular day.
All the radio stations are playing only Beatle music.
You could walk down the street and hear Beatles albums from one end of the street to the other, and being played backwards, and I mean every apartment, every house.
It was like an explosion. I couldn't believe it. It was in the papers. It was everywhere. It was in the major magazines covering it. Is Paul dead?
Brother Paul, I'm crying. Are you really lying? Every night and day beneath the cold and lonely stone. Are you getting older or just getting colder?
The album Abbey Road came out, and I was working for the newspaper, and it was my assignment to review Abbey Road. I drove back to Ann Arbor that night, and I had I was considering the Abbey Road review and how to approach that. So the next morning I got up and went to class, and I came back after my early class, and I had to write this review. So I took my little Beatles albums and set them all up in front of my desk in my little apartment there in front of my typewriter. This would be October 14th, 1969, Tuesday morning, the Michigan Daily. And there's the front page. You see all the stuff going on. And then you turn to page 2, and there it is. McCartney dead. New evidence brought to light. The story begins as a news story. Paul McCartney was killed in an automobile accident in early November 1966 after leaving EMI recording studios, tired, sad, and dejected. That's the lead. And then it says that the Beatles were obviously distraught, and they did not want to disclose this information to the world, so they covered it up, found a look-alike, a guy named William Campbell, and he would take Paul's place in the group, and the clues about this event were then released in the different albums. And then I went through and cataloged a lot of these so-called clues.
Paul was walking barefoot across Abbey Road, and that had to indicate that he was dead, because it's a sign of dead people, is people walking barefoot.
What looks like a funeral procession.
That this was the grave digger, and this was the undertaker, and this was the preacher.
Paul was left-handed. Why was he smoking a cigarette in his right hand? The license plate on this Volkswagen says 28 if. He would be 28 if he were still alive.
And this is George.
Paul McCartney.
Paul
yes.
McCartney.
Made a mistake again, hey?
No, I never make a mistake
No.
again. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
You're a left-handed guitar player too?
Yes, it's done by mirrors.
By mirrors?
If you watch me in that mirror, I'm right-handed.
You're right-handed.
It's amazing, really.
Hey, 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 hey.
There's some great moments singing that, Paul, but it wasn't the one.
Hey, hey,
Do you want to hear any of it before you do any more, or do you want to go straight for another?
hey, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
Fred Labor, the writer for the Michigan Daily, the University of Michigan newspaper, had no idea that his record review would turn into a story of international significance.
I was scared. When it first came out, it was like it took on this worldwide sort of importance, and I was just, this Weisenheimer kid in Michigan, who would cause this. So it was like, whoa, I was not prepared to deal with it.
Give you everything I've got for a little peace of mind. Give you everything I've got for a little peace of mind.
Paul McCartney, it wasn't like he was dead and you couldn't get a hold of the Paul McCartney that was Paul McCartney now, but that Paul had died, maybe a year or two previously, and that they had a substitute playing Paul.
This legend went that Paul had been killed in an automobile crash.
Well, maybe he did die. He hadn't done any personal appearances for a while. He hadn't done any. They weren't doing any live concerts at that period. We hadn't seen him, so maybe he did die.
I saw the photograph. He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed.
Genuinely started on college campuses, and I don't even know which college campus, but it started on some college campus and, spread to another one and another one.
I went to school in a place called Ypsilanti the college was called Eastern Michigan University. My roommate of mine had some friends, and I believe that these friends brought these clues from, we think, Illinois, and trying to determine how I'd heard them, but I was collecting them, and I collected more and more.
I was studying journalism at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. I went back early that year to help put together the back-to-school issue of the newspaper. I had been the first one to write about this, and a lot of people mistakenly thought that I started the rumor, that it was me making it up, and not recognizing that I was just writing a story as a journalist. People talked about it and were interested in it, and then everybody kind of forgot about it until about a month later, we started getting phone calls from radio stations and reporters, news organizations.
Those weeks was right when they said you was there.
The Beatles.
The one mistake you made was
Oh, of course. Abbey Road. The story. The first one with clues, I think, was the Sgt. Pepper. With the grave on the front and the flowers in the shape of a bass guitar. And the whole sense that this is a funeral, and the hand over Paul's head.
He's wearing a patch on his left arm. It says, "Oh, SPD. This meant he was officially pronounced dead.
Oh, here's another one. The only one with his back turned. Just a coincidence? I don't know.
Like, place this in front of a mirror and see what these things say?
I think I gave it a framework. I think that was my contribution to the hoax, was that I invented a framework to put it all in. And I invented a lot of the clues. I wrote something down that people could point to and say, see, something's really going on here. So I just imagined this whole scenario and wrote it as sort of a quasi-news story with a lot of facts and enough facts that were true to sort of keep pulling you along, and enough facts that weren't true that hopefully would let you know that this was a joke. This was a satire. I knew it was funny and it would be sensational, but sensational in my own hometown. I didn't think it would be. It was funny, the first day I got calls from Detroit, the second day from Chicago, the third day it got to the East Coast in New York and Washington, and then after that the West Coast. So it just went pow, pow, pow. And finally I just stopped answering the phone. I just got tired of talking about it. And I'd say, yes, it's all true, I made it all up. They took it seriously. I know. You write things in the paper, people are going to believe it.
Well, I didn't bury Paul because, quite frankly, it was the kids that called me.
I don't know who started this. And I don't know if the Beatles were involved.
I wrote the article because it was a good story. I thought people would like to read it.
He had heard these clues from someone else and wrote the article. But who did he get it from?
This guy, his name was D'Artagnan Brown, Dart Brown, a friend of mine who was also an editor on the school paper. He thinks he heard about it from some musicians who were passing through Des Moines, and he happened to spend a late night with them and got to talking about the music scene in general, and he thinks that's where he got it, from some musicians passing through town.
Had a different view. Hey there, Paul, what's new? Did Judas really talk to you, or did you put us on?
The best line in relevance to the Paul is dead hoax would be a line about, are you putting the world on? Hey, Paul. And that would be 4 months before the whole Beatle mania machine was picking up. Terry Knight was a new singer. Apple Records made their announcement in early 1968 that they were going to cultivate talent. I mean, zillions of people flocked to London to get their piece of the apple pie. And Terry Knight certainly was the kind of guy who would get there pretty early and pretty aggressively. He was there on that fateful evening of, I believe it was August, the end of August 1968, when the Beatles were in the studio.
I told you about the war is a mean man. You know that we're as close as can be, man. Well, here's another clue for you all. The walrus was Paul, standing on the cast iron shore, yeah. Lady Madonna trying to make ends meet, yeah. Looking through a glass onion.
He was up to getting a record contract with Apple Records, but obviously it got canceled. So he goes back, probably really traumatized by not scoring that audition, seeing the Beatles disintegrate before his very eyes, and jotted down a little song.
You knew it all along. Something had gone wrong. They couldn't hear your song of sadness in the air while they were crying out, beware your flowers and long hair, while you and Sergeant Pepper saw the writing on the wall.
When it first came out in May of 1969, it was published by Storybook, which was Terry Knight's publishing house. once they heard about this record being issued, they issued a cease and desist order, and something was worked out. And a month later, it's reissued by McCartney. That is Paul McCartney and John Lennon's label. McCartney Music was the publishing organ for the four Beatles, and in this one instance, Terry Knight St. Paul.
I thought of that for a moment, that maybe, you know, somewhere along the line the Beatles had concocted this thing or told somebody to start spreading the rumor, and I never got any indication of that. I mean, I looked for that. I sincerely wanted to believe that this was some kind of publicity stunt.
All of a sudden, people were buying 2 or 3 albums at a time to play them backwards. Now, that's very hard on a record. You start playing records backwards, you wear them out very rapidly. And of course, that was what got everybody excited in the record industry.
They were all smart guys. They all knew how to get publicity.
Not only Abbey Road were they short of, they're sold out of it. They had to re-release all of their old tunes.
You have to admit, it's one of the great marketing ploys of all time. I mean, if your publicity people could not dream up a better plan where you have to buy all this product and destroy it, pretty much play it backwards and whatnot, to find these clues.
Whatever happened at that little studio, just like this, at Keener that day, has forever changed the story of the Beatles. It's the great Ghoul story. It's the thing that makes people think. And even today, people buy records and play them backwards.
I'm sorry if I've been a bother to the Beatles, because I love them so much, and I love Paul so much. And if I've been because it's sort of incongruous to me that this great musician that has really changed my life and changed so many lives with his music is having to field a lot of questions about, are you alive, or are you William Campbell? Because this dewy-cheeked Weisenheimer in Michigan has made up this ridiculous story. That bothers me a little bit. I don't want to be. I'm sorry if I've annoyed him. On the other hand, I think they should send me a fruit basket because I sold so many records for them.
There's some things that are best said after we leave the planet. Understand? And so that's basically what it is. There is one piece of information that somebody gave me in London about this whole story that I'm not sure if it's key, but it certainly is important. And I'll let people just guess at what it is until I put it down on paper, and I may never see it. And the Beatles may not even be around, but someday it'll come out.